Number one, define your superpower. What is the particular set of skills, experiences, attitudes, preferences, values that you represent, and what do you deliver with it?
You have found Authentic Business Adventures, the business program that brings you the struggle stories and triumphant successes of business owners across the land. Downloadable audio episodes can be found on the podcast link found at drawinCustomers.com. We are locally underwritten by the Bank of Sun Prairie, Calls on Call Extraordinary Answering Service, as well as the Bold Business Book. And today we're welcoming / preparing to learn from John Tarnoff of the Reinvention Group, which we are going to be talking about careers and career transition. So John, how are you doing today?
Doing great, James. Thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, I'm excited to chat with you because as an entrepreneur, I get the luxury, we'll call it, of hiring people. And it's rare that I think about what it was like on the other side to be the interviewee. And I saw your name come across and I was like, when was the last time that I had a job interview? And I thought, when is the last time that you had to go through all these things that people that aren't entrepreneurial have to go through? And it made me kind of pause and think, like, what do they have to go through? I don't even know what the world's like now on that side of the table. So let's just start out with what is the Reinvention Group, and then we'll take it from there as far as careers go.
Great. So Reinvention Group is my career coaching and executive leadership practice, which I've been doing now for the past 12 years. And it grows out of a kind of a long and checkered career as an executive in the entertainment business here in Los Angeles, where I worked for multiple film studios, worked on my own as a producer, pitching projects, getting films made. And then I took a kind of a 10-year sabbatical out of the business into technology in the 90s during that famous tech bubble. Had a startup with a partner. We kind of rode it up, raised all the money, got our product out the door, had some big deals. And then in 2001, when the market tanked, we tanked along with it. And I was fortunate enough to find myself back in the entertainment business, but in more of a people role, which is really what set up this more consulting entrepreneurial approach to career coaching and executive coaching that has led me to where I am today.
That is cool. John, I didn't know you were involved in the tech bubble thing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I had a little startup called Talkie, and we were doing artificial intelligence before it became fashionable. We were doing little animated characters for customer service that had a natural language database, and you could design this little bot for your website and ask it questions and get answers. And we did this. So we had a big signature deal with Sprint to create a customer service character for their website. And then we were launching around the time that the market crashed. Sprint was going through all sorts of stuff. We launched it, and then it all just kind of went away.
Dang. So you're talking, I mean, I'm trying to think, late 90s into 2001. Is that the Microsoft paperclip guy? Is that kind of that vintage?
So we used to get teased a lot about Clippy, and I forget what our analogy was, but we were saying that what we were doing was to Clippy, the way a supersonic jet is to the Wright brothers.
All right. So, I mean,
Yeah.
now we're talking. I'm going to go down this rabbit hole a little bit because I'm so curious.
Yeah, sure. It's a fun one.
So right now, AI chips, NVIDIA, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
Psycho.
Right.
Back then, what were you using for processors back then?
Sure. So that was one of the big challenges, was to do this in an economical way. The AI was not so much the issue as the animation. And we started out doing this. We were thinking we're going to do a 3D engine, and there was a technology at the time for games called 3DFX, which was kind of a very prominent graphics card that was in use. And we were initially designing our graphics side for the 3DFX card, and we had a 3D developer working with us who was saying, how am I ever going to get this into a downloadable client that people are going to be able to just put on their computers and run this thing? He said, why don't you just, he said, I'm about to fire myself. Why don't you just do this in Flash? So you
Oh,
remember, right? So you remember Flash was
oh
this
yeah.
animation engine from Macromedia that I think Adobe had wound up buying. And it was very economical. It was very small. It came preloaded on pretty much every computer back in the day. So we created a Flash client that made this instantly available on most every computer. And so you could log on to our website. And this is how we got the Sprint deal, because we went to Kansas City to this customer service executive's office. We plugged in to the wall with our laptop and we got this character to have a conversation with her over dial-up.
Over dial-up.
Over dial-up.
Talking 56K on a lucky day.
If that, if that.
Wow.
And so that was the kind of the lucky accident of going and doing it in Flash. We were able to demo to anyone, anywhere. The AI side of it was a lot lighter to work with because we weren't doing the kind of this wasn't real AI. This was pattern recognition, right? This was really based on some of those early pattern recognition engines that had come out of MIT. You may remember a bot called Eliza, which was this therapy bot that was started at MIT. And we were kind of piggybacking on a number of developments that had come since then to kind of create this conversational database. And what we brought to it, and I don't want to go into too much, of the rabbit hole, but what we did, because my partner and I kind of came out of the media business, and he on the computer game side and me on the film side, and we came up with this kind of half joke, which we used to pitch, where we called our system artificial stupidity. And the idea behind that was that it followed the patterns of cocktail party conversations, where you get into a conversation with someone, if you don't want to talk about something, you switch the subject. Right. There are all sorts of strategies that you use to be able to keep a conversation going without necessarily getting into any depth or detail. So we programmed the system to be able to do that. So when a character didn't know the answer to a question, it would change the subject. And it would have multiple pathways to change the subject. If it kept coming back to that topic, eventually the character would say, this conversation's over. I can't have a conversation with you. You're an idiot. And log off.
Oh my gosh.
And that's how we dealt with the fact that that the system was not really intelligent. We could not have passed the Turing test the way most of these systems can pass the Turing test today. It's insane what's been going on over the last 5-10 years.
Yeah, that is surreal. It'd be cool to be on the cutting edge and all that jazz, but
great. Well, I mean, the downside of it is that when it all fell apart, my partner had this great line. We kind of got up to speed. We had this converted warehouse in Venice Beach with about 40, 50 developers working for us at the peak when we were on the Sprint deal, and we had another couple of deals that we're working on. And then it all kind of went away, and we're sitting there in this empty warehouse, 3 years in, and my partner turns to me and he goes, "Well, I guess the future's gone out of style."
I love it. I love it. So tell me just really quick about the downfall of that. That wasn't exactly like a pandemic thing where you got an email that says, hey, by the way, you're out of business. That was a somewhat gradual thing, right?
That was
over the course of a year?
The gradual thing that happened over a course of a year. I would say April of 2001 is when it all started. And our board members called us up and said, we have to have a meeting. You guys have got to, downsize. You got to get resilient. You got to work on more product, blah, blah, blah. So we had some strategies in place, and we kept it going for, I'd say, another 18 to 24 months after that. And which was pretty good. We kind of kept all of our investors in line. I learned a lot about investor relations in that period. You can be sure. And you focus on leadership. This was a real test. I don't think I had any idea what I was getting into at that point in terms of being able to lead internally and externally, both the internal stakeholders, the people that we had brought on, and downsizing that company was painful. It was painful for everyone. I think everyone understood what we were dealing with. We tried to do our best. I think in 98% of the cases, we were able to do well by our people. There were a couple of people who expected more, and we had promised more. We couldn't deliver it. We had some issues which we tried to resolve as best we could. And then on the investor side, it required a lot of hand-holding, a lot of communication. And I think in an interesting way, it taught me the power of vulnerability.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more about that.
Sure, because typically I think in our culture we want to try to be strong and be tough and never let them see you sweat, right? That's kind of the approach that most of us I think are kind of taught. And what I found was that when I really kind of got into the nitty-gritty with people, and I would call up, and I remember one key investor who really had the ear of pretty much everyone else. It was a large group of interconnected angel investors who had funded us. And this guy didn't want to be fed the line. He wanted to know really what was going on. And I said to him, look, here's what we're facing. Here's how we're dealing with it. I'm ashamed that it has come to this. We've done the best we could. Perhaps if we had done this before, we would have been more prepared to deal with it. But the more I opened up to him, the more he trusted me, and the more he continued to back us and to defend us with the rest of the investors. I don't think any of them were looking to sue us, but I do think that if we had handled it poorly, I think they would have. I think if they had felt shut out, I think if they had felt manipulated, then I think they would have sued us.
Wow. That is crazy. It's interesting in the businesses that I run. Sounds like businesses that you've been through. You're trying to do something essentially perfect that you haven't necessarily done before.
Right.
It's like, here's a basketball, make that 3/4 court shot every single time. Yeah. Like, wait, do I get a few practice shots? Like, nope. And we're going to be really mad if you don't make it.
Yeah. And here's the interesting thing about that, because that evokes my entertainment business background. Because when you're in the entertainment business, and I want to make an analogy to the larger world that we're living in today, the entertainment business was always a business where every time a new film, TV show, record comes out, it's an entirely, not just a new product, it's a new product line. You really have no way of knowing whether this product line is going to succeed. Now, having said that, one of the things that the entertainment business has done, particularly the movie and TV business has done over the last 20 years, I would say, is to focus in on franchises, to focus in on pre-sold material in a way that they never did before. There was always this idea that, well, if you could base a movie on a book that had been successful, well, then you had a shot. So you think of, big movies like Jaws or The Exorcist. Those classic movies came out of books. But at the same time, you also had original movies that, kind of became huge. I mean, The Godfather is another example of that, right? One of the greatest movies of American cinema based on a bestseller book. But there were also original movies, and very often those original movies spawned their own major cultural shifts. Star Wars, of course, being the example. I mean, that was a project that was, no one knew what to do with that. This was George Lucas's little science fiction vision, and he's done 2 movies, and okay, so Universal passed on it. Fox gave him a small budget to go out to Morocco and wherever, Tunisia, and make this little science fiction movie. No one knew what to do with it. And here we are, right? 50 years later, and this is still going on. It's like, major pillar of revenue for Disney. So you just never knew. And when you're talking about the startup world and trying to pitch a project, I kind of came into that from having that background in movies where every time out, you've got to swing for the fences and you have no idea whether it's going to work. And by the way, the fences keep getting moved back and forth. So you're not really sure where that home run is going to be.
Yeah, so true. So true. I'm so happy to hear that I'm not alone in that.
Yeah. And let me tell you this, the interesting thing that's evolved, and this is, I think, the reason why I love doing what I do now, is that this uncertainty about business, this need to be nimble, to have a growth mindset, to, as Michael Dell put this years ago at the start of Dell when it took off, and someone said, so, how do you manage this quickly changing business? He said, every day it's a startup. So he never took his eye off of that awareness that it could change on a dime. So I think most businesses today, given the technology disruption that we've experienced over the last 30, 40 years, is a startup. I don't care if it is, General Motors or Tesla or, or any business that's out there, you can get disrupted tomorrow by someone coming up and changing the game.
Fair. Totally fair. Yeah, even you think about entertainment industry just since Netflix came around and all that. We're talking 5 years.
There you go. Yeah.
Changed the game.
Blockbuster could have bought Netflix and they turned it down. They turned it down.
Yeah, way back when. It's so funny. I hear stories like that. And you're like, what was Blockbuster thinking? But I remember my brother-in-law dragging me to some multi-level marketing thing. It was Amway at the time, but they didn't call it Amway. It was some online. We were supposed to give people a website. They'd go to this website and then buy stuff from other websites. It was kind of a bridge thing.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, and I was like, no one's going to give their credit card number online. This is crazy.
Right.
And I was apparently wrong. So
yeah,
I look at stuff like that. I'm like, you don't know.
Yeah.
Nobody knows.
Yeah.
So
I mean, the end of in my former business, the end of physical media, right? The idea that there would not be a disc or a cassette or some physical, tangible thing, right? That people would forego that. I still have all of my iTunes backup somewhere on my computer. I don't know how many thousands of tracks from that database. And every once in a while, I'm kind of doing a review or I'm kind of cleaning my files out. And I see that folder and I go, nah, I'm not going to go with it because, I mean, for better or worse, I love Spotify, and I just and there's certain things that I can't get on Spotify, and for that I still have my 650 albums in the other room and the turntable, and I'll go in there and I'll listen. But for most of music and discovery, I don't need the physical, right?
no, I'm right there with you.
I'm happy to pay the subscription.
It's interesting just in that light that there used to be a process, kind of I don't know, it was fun to go to Sam Goody or Musicland or whatever.
Yeah, Tower Records, yeah.
Yeah, get that CD or that. I remember getting cassettes. My first record was Purple Rain, the single. It was a Purple 45.
Right. Wow.
And just like that was a day.
Yeah.
Right, to get that thing.
Sure. I mean,
and now you're just like click download.
Part of the social contract, right? But I think that's that's always changing in society. And I think again to this conversation about leadership and entrepreneurship, that is, I think, another important part of the growth mindset, which is now more important than ever. And kind of tooting my own horn and kind of getting it back on this track. That is one of the most important things that I work on with my clients is this idea of battling the inertia that we all tend to experience or believe in if we've been in a job for 20 years, right? Maybe you've done it for one company, which is rare, but maybe you've done it for two or three companies. Maybe you're a marketing or sales executive or technology or project manager or program manager, and you're on this track and you're kind of building your career up the ladder, more responsibility, better title, better money. And what often happens in mid-career is that you kind of look around and you go, what was I doing? What's the purpose of all this? I've gotten to this level. I thought this is where I want to be. Now I'm here. Where do I want to go from now? And at the same time, what's going on in business is people are looking at you differently. They're going, okay, so you're 45, 50, 55. What have you done for me lately? Mm-hmm. And why am I going to continue to trust you to deliver going forward when I got this 30-year-old who seems to have the latest skills and is more plugged in? And what do I do about this? So I think people are looking for us to be more valuable, to provide more definitive deliverables and results as we age in our profession. And the leadership that we need to do is the leadership for ourselves to be able to say, okay, here's my value proposition. It's not, oh, I've been around the block. I can do anything. What have you got? Nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants a generalist. They want you to be a very specific specialist. And the risk that you take is you're gonna leave a lot of stuff on the table if you do that. But when you connect, you really connect with someone who needs what you can provide. So that's a big mind shift for a lot of people. I'm working with a guy right now, and he put this very interestingly. He said he's 55, big marketing executive in New York, laid off by the former company, looking for the next gig, not really sure where he wants to go. And I said, so what's this anxiety that you're experiencing? And he says, I need the next assignment. Mm. And I said, here's the problem. No one's going to give you that assignment. You have to give yourself the assignment. And once you give yourself that assignment and you figure out what that is, what you love to do, what you do well, what your world needs, and what you can get paid for, those four so-called ikigai questions, the Japanese idea of life's purpose, then you can start to develop your renewed value proposition. Because now you're in the driver's seat, you're in control, you're offering a product, a service out into the world. It's really clear what that is. People will be able to say, okay, I know what I'm going to get for this guy. It's exactly what I need. Come on in, right? And that's how you build your career in mid-career and beyond.
Nice. I like it. But as I hear you talking, I was like, if I had a choice between a 30-year-old and a 45-year-old, I'd hire the 45-year-old, all things being equal.
Well, good for you. And thank you on behalf of all the 45-year-olds.
Well, I'm right there with you. But the main reason is all they'd have to do in the interview is say, I'll show up. I'm like, you're hired, man. Because a lot of those 30-year-olds think that showing up is, if I feel like it.
Yeah.
So it's, whatever way the wind blows as far as that goes. But tell me a story. You got the New York marketing guy. I imagine you have other clients. They come to you because I imagine they're lost of some kind. They can't find what they're looking for. Maybe they don't even know what they're looking for in regards to their career. Help me with that a little bit.
I think it really is, it really does center around the meaning and purpose idea for the most part. And I think, one refrain that I hear a lot from people in their 50s is, why am I having such a hard time getting a job? I never used to have a hard time getting a job. And now all of a sudden, it's like, what have I got, a bullseye on my forehead or something? What's going on? And I think it goes to the questions we were just talking about in terms of what's the value that you're delivering. People want older professionals to have it together, to have a sense of what they do. And you're talking about the job interview. One of the big problems, I think, with job interviews is that it's the blind leading the blind. Recruiters, hiring managers, for the most part, whomever is conducting that interview, they have not been trained to interview people. They're not talent experts. They're trying to find someone to fit on their team. And I mean, look, we were talking about hiring before. You've been in that situation. I've been in that situation. So one job you don't want to have as an entrepreneur or a manager is to write a job description.
Oh,
It
man.
is the worst, right? Am I
So
right?
true. So true.
So what happens is you're in a company, you've got deadlines and deliverables, you've got a manager, you've got an open position on your team. Okay, let HR write the job description because I just don't have the time. I don't know how to, and they're the experts, right? Well, wrong, because they have no idea what you need. So it's a broken system going in. But if you, as the candidate, have a really clear idea about what it is that you provide, what's your secret sauce, what's your methodology, your framework that you use to do the work that you do and deliver what you deliver, then you can control that interview by going in and deflecting a lot of the stupid questions that they ask you, like, so what was a time in your career where you made a mistake? Or come on, and by the way, if you don't know what the questions are that people ask in interviews, just ask Google, because the lists will pour out. And your job is to deflect those questions back to your agenda and talk about what it is that you deliver and how that relates to your sense of what the job description is. But you also want to do your research about the company, about the hiring manager, about the department, about the products, about the investors, if it's a public company. Those aspects, you want to be really, really thoroughly checked out before you get in there, so you can actually make the connections for them, because they're not necessarily going to see it. And if you can be that proactive in that interview and not feel like, oh my God, I got to prepare for the questions that they're going to ask me. No, use your clear value proposition, which, by the way, you want to have available in your LinkedIn profile. Use that as the template, because guess what? Once you're done with the interview, they're going to look at your LinkedIn. They're going to go, oh, right, they talked about this in the interview. They talked about this success that they had making this deal, or they talked about the skill set that they have. And oh, right, now I get it. So it's one consistent package that you're presenting, makes it easier for them to present you to their committee, and gives them a greater sense of understanding who you are, what you're going to deliver, gives you the leg up if you want that job to get that job.
Tell me, as far as interviews go, your clients, are they typically running through multiple interviews for the same position?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think any job at a mid-senior level today is going to happen without multiple interviews, and without what I call the spanking machine, where you're going through multiple interviews. You're going through team interviews, which are the worst, particularly if you're doing it remotely, where you've got this person there, that person there, and then people are just kind of like, they're looking at their phones while they're on the interview with you. I mean, it's murder, right? It's murder to kind of get your point across. But this is what we have to go through.
Tell me about the Teams interview, because I have those when I'm interviewing. And I do those for a couple of reasons. One, it stemmed from a few years ago, well, actually quite a few years ago, when we would hold interviews and the people wouldn't show up one-on-one. So I'm like, well, we can stop wasting time. We can just have
The
group
people
interviews.
on your team wouldn't show
Yeah.
up. Yeah.
Yep. First it was in person, way back then. Now that we have a remote team, we do Zoom interviews where they're essentially multiple. And sometimes you'll have one or two candidates. I think the most I had was 8, and that was a mess. We're getting used to essentially about 50% showing up, but recently that number's gone higher for the number of people that show up. It's close.
right?
It's approaching 100% now.
Right. And this is the 100% is on your side, the people who are showing up to interview someone that you're thinking about hiring. Yeah.
Correct. Correct.
So what kind of pre-meet or training do you do for those interviews? Or do you basically say, we got this position, we got this candidate, here's the Zoom meeting, we'd love you to show up.
That before we have, we use video ask, which essentially is just video interview.
Yes.
Two video, just essentially question answer. Video number one is a question. They answered in a video. Video number two is another question. They answer that in a video. And that offers two things for us. One is it's one more hurdle for them to jump through for us to make sure they're real and interested. And two, I'm trying to think what we ask on those questions. They're not like, what's your biggest strength or weakness or something like that.
Well, I mean, that's a good technology, I think, as a way of segmenting, your leads and really kind of funneling your candidates and making sure that they are appropriate. But where I'm going with this question about the team interview is, I think it's really important to prepare the interview team for any interviews. So if it's kind of part of their job description to be invited to these interviews, whether they're able to show up or not, and obviously if they've got a conflict, you understand that. But I think it's really important, certainly for your organization, if I may be so bold, and for all organizations, to really make that a skill set that is taught, trained to individuals so that they know how to behave on these calls. There is coordination before the meeting as to who is going to address what questions. So it's not a free-for-all. There are certain protocols which people should follow, which is, if you're going to be on the call, don't be distracted. Shut everything else out. Really give the candidate the courtesy of your full attention, because this is their life. Right.
Very true.
You're fortunate enough to have a job that you go to every day. This person, not so much. So put yourself in their situation. Be a little bit empathetic. Really try to figure out how you could be supportive, not to trip them up, but to give them the best opportunity to express their value. Because think about it. You don't want to foster a culture of gotchas, amongst your team, right? You don't want to have everyone kind of trying to trip everyone else up on the team. You want people to collaborate, to give themselves the benefit of the doubt, to help one another out, to mentor others. You want to treat the candidate with the same deference and positive culture that you promote within your company. So those are some of the considerations that I think are important for team interviews and training employees who are part of these committees to perform up to par. You'll get better results. You'll get a much better sense of who this person is, whether they fit on your team, by promoting a positive interaction.
Yeah, absolutely. When culture goes, I mean, that's the name of the game as far as what we do.
Yeah, absolutely.
When I interview people, the mindset that I like to have is that I am going to hire this person unless they prove to me that I should not.
I love that. That's great.
And sometimes you interview people and after 5 minutes, you're like, you proved that awfully fast. And other times you're like, hey, you're hired.
The reason they're in the interview is because they've gotten through the other stages, right? You shouldn't be interviewing someone right off the bat. It should be because you've looked at their background, you've checked them out. Other people have looked at the profile. And the beauty of LinkedIn is that everyone can access that candidate, right? You don't have to email the resume around and go, I didn't get that. Who is this again? What's it for? Right? No, it's very easy for everyone to get on the same page about the candidate and say, okay, should we bring this person in? Here are 3 or 4 LinkedIn profiles. Go check them out and let's talk about this. And then we'll all get on a call and we'll say, okay, what do we think? So by the time that person comes in, to your point, you want that person to be someone that you would likely want to hire. And now you're going to just see what they're like in person.
Yeah, I love it.
It reminds me very much of the casting process in films and TV in a strange way,
Oh,
because absolutely, because it is you're putting together a team. That's what a production is. You've got your team that's in front of the camera, and you got your team that's behind the camera. We're all relying on prior work, right? You've got that resume, but in the case of the creative fields, you also have the portfolio, right? You have that person's set you've got their reel, right? So an actor's got various scenes from the different productions they've been in to show they can handle comedy, they can handle drama, they can cry on cue, whatever that might be. Similarly, the cameraman, the editor, they've all got prior work. So in the regular world, LinkedIn kind of becomes that opportunity for us. And I want to encourage people who are working on their LinkedIn profile to not just use it as a online resume. It's so much more. It's such an opportunity for you to show your work, to put up a PowerPoint that you're really proud of. Obviously, it has to be, it has to be public facing, right? You can't just put up a proprietary set of figures up there and not get dinged for it. But you want to use the ability to include media, background, recommendations to round out the profile so people can really get to know you as a way of understanding, should this person be right for our team?
plus the value of their network. When I see people on LinkedIn that we're looking at hiring and they got 6 connections or something like that, I'm like, all right, you don't
Right.
take that seriously, or you haven't been on there for a long time, which isn't necessarily bad unless you're
Yeah.
looking for a job. I can't tell anything about you that way.
This gets into thought leadership. So the three factors that I believe are important for us to create a viable career strategy. Number one, define your superpower. What is the particular set of skills, experiences, attitudes, preferences, values that you represent, and what do you deliver with it? Use your LinkedIn profile to articulate that value proposition, that sense of you as the complete professional. Number two, out of your network of hopefully, you're 500 plus on LinkedIn, but out of that network of many people that you've encountered that are on your profile, what's your community? What is that subset of your network that has your back, that really aligns with your way of thinking, that can be helpful to you? And you, by the way, can be helpful to them as part of their community. Build this aligned group of people who can refer you to jobs, who can give you the feedback that you need to improve your profile, to improve your posture out in the world. And then the third element is thought leadership, this idea that you were talking about, where they've only got 50 connections. I don't know what the presence is. I see the resume, but I don't really have a sense of who they are. Thought leadership is your engagement in your professional world. LinkedIn is a great place to do it, but there are other real life opportunities, professional organizations, conferences, events, mentoring, teaching, anything that you can do to get out into the world with your particular philosophy of business. What's your secret sauce? What are the topics that you think are existential threats to the future of your industry? Talk about them, start conversations around them, build consensus around strategies so that you can come across to your prospective employer as someone who's engaged, who's a strategic, critical thinker, who is going to mesh with the value set that you're promoting through your business. So those three elements working together, I think, provide a really strong foundation for employers to evaluate candidates and for candidates to get the best jobs for them.
I love it. You remind me of a conversation that I had. We had a company meeting, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, and we got talking about social media and going down that little rabbit hole. And a few of my employees were all excited about the different TikTok people that they follow. And one of them was talking about following some guy who apparently finds different sticks. And I was like, wait, what? He just walks around, finds a stick, and puts up the videos of it. And she's like, "Yeah, I'm addicted. Oh my gosh, it's so amazing." And I said it out loud, and I probably shouldn't have, but I was like, if I would have known that you were interested in that, I don't know if I would have hired you. Because I want to find someone when I'm interviewing that's in growth mode of some kind. Either you're
Right.
reading books that are leading you to improvement of some kind, or you're learning a skill, whether that's public speaking or guitar. I don't care. As long as you're trying to grow as a person.
Yes.
I don't I don't know what the stick world is like, but I feel
Yeah.
like growth there is a little limited. And so it's
Look,
just
I
like
think we all need entertainment, right? We
fair,
all
fair.
right. We all need to, but here's the distinction. We all need to unwind and we all need to do mindless stuff, right? As part of our day, our week. I don't know that I would mention it to my boss,
Well, I
right?
mean, she
I
felt
think,
comfortable enough, so I guess that's
yeah,
cool.
I suppose so. I suppose so. But I think your response is kind of telling because what you're doing is you're kind of thinking, well, wait a minute, what does this say about this person? Right. And hopefully you know her well enough to know that she is also involved in those other more constructive development oriented practices in her life, and that in fact, yes, this is just a fun distraction that we all have those, right? So I think we all got to come clean around that, but it is in context, I think, of this larger sense of, again, growth mindset of channeling the time that we spend constructively. And it could be fun. It should be fun, right? Everything that we do, I would hope, is going to be fun for the most part. I think we want to try to angle it that way. This is kind of the first question I ask to clients. It's like, when was the time in your career where you had the most fun?
Oh,
Right?
great question.
Right? Because that's the time when you're most engaged, most productive. You're feeling the sense of flow. You're loving the people you're working with. They're loving you. It's your time of kind of greatest output, I would say. So you want to try to recapture that in one way or another going forward to the greatest extent possible. So, it could involve following someone who collects sticks or I don't know, whatever that might be. And I mean, TikTok is a crazy rabbit hole.
It certainly is.
But at the same time, there is growth, there is development, there's curiosity, which I think is a really important quality that we want to look for both in ourselves and in other people, is finding that curiosity, because that in a way is more important than skills. Right? If you're curious about something, that's going to drive you to learn, to master a skill set, to understand where it fits into the world. That's really important.
That's fair. That's fair. I like that. I can imagine if you're the stick guy and you're looking online before you're the stick guy and you're like, you know what, this is garbage. We can have fun with this. And you come up with this thing and all of a sudden your channel blows up and you're like, well, I guess I'm looking for sticks now.
Right? Maybe I can get a sponsorship. Right?
Could you imagine? You meet this guy in a bar and you're like, what do you do? Right? And you're like, hey, I got a podcast, call answering service, it's all good.
Yeah,
What do you do?
sticks.
Oh, I got this channel. I find sticks. And you're like, no,
Stick
seriously, what do you?
channel.
And he's like, no, it's amazing. I got 20 billion followers or something. And I'm like, all right, dude, you got to tell me your secret because that is
Right.
amazing. I'm going to look at sticks in a whole different way now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's an audience for everyone out there somewhere.
That, oh my gosh, so true. So true. Tell me a story about I guess I got this marketing guy, the 50-some-year-old marketing guy in my head. He's been in marketing most of his professional career. Let's just
Mhm.
say he's like, you know what? I'm kind of sick of the marketing game. I want to do something else. What do you tell that guy?
So this is a question that I get a lot about, should I just do a 180-degree pivot? And I have to say, after doing this for 12 years, I think that to just close the door on your past and go completely into something new is not the best idea. I think of this in a much more integrated way. I think what you want to do is, again, back to when did you have fun, is distill from everything that you've done, what is it what are the elements of that that really float your boat, right? That really inspire you, that really satisfy you, that really give you a sense of meaning. Pull those out of the equation. And it could be, I love delivering presentations, but I hate writing proposals. I love going to meet clients, but I hate internal meetings. Whatever that might be, think about what are your love to haves, must haves, deal breakers, and take a more reflective, conscious approach to understanding what you do, what you love to do. Again, those 4 Ikigai questions. And start looking around those preferred aspects of your work. Start talking about that with your community that you're building up of like-minded people who have got your back. Get their ideas on this. Have conversations around this. Look for the unexplored, unexpected outlets for this work. Don't necessarily turn your back on your past. Maybe look for a new way of doing what you did, or finding a new audience for what you didn't do well. Look for ways of kind of mixing it up so that you don't lose the value of everything that you've worked for and built up as a professional over these years. Find a new way of making it work, of connecting to maybe a new audience, a new employer, a new field, but still anchoring your work in that past, in the good part of that past.
Nice. I love it. Tell me a story about resumes and how you help your clients stand out, because we're approaching the point, or coming up on the point, at least in my world, where it is less of an employee game and more of an employer game. I think there's cycles, right?
Yeah.
And it has been an employee game for a very long time, where you'd get a handful of resumes, most of them people didn't know the alphabet. And now you're actually showing up with people that got some skills. And so you have to differentiate yourself as an employee, saying you should pick me because, but in the end, initially, your pile of resumes or an email, maybe a cover letter. How do you help your clients distinguish themselves to get noticed?
I'm not a big believer in resumes.
Oh,
okay. I think the resume is it's a dinosaur. It is a vestigial convention from an earlier age when we didn't have electronics, we didn't have digital. There's a guy named Gary Burnison, who is the president of Korn Ferry, which is the big recruiting talent agency, global business. And he has a new book, I believe it's called Ditch the Resume, Get the Job. If one of the top recruiters in the world is telling you to ditch the resume, I would pay attention to that message. And what he's saying is, and what I believe wholeheartedly, is that the resume is a limited reflection of who you are as a professional and what you provide as a professional. It is a retrospective outline of your past accomplishments. And as they say in the financial services world, past performance is no indicator of future success. This is why I'm a big fan of the LinkedIn profile, not as an online resume, but as an opportunity to share your value proposition, to make your about section not a bio, a classic bio where it's basically a text version of your resume, but a mission statement about who you are, why you do what you do, and where you want to take it. It's a conversation starter. It's a call to conversation. And this is what I work on very centrally with everyone that I coach, is to build a foundation in that LinkedIn profile, in that headline and that about section, to really give the prospective employer, hiring manager, recruiter, a sense of who you are to the point where they feel like they've met you before they've met you.
Love it.
And in that process of, again, defining your superpower, articulating it through your profile, that's how you stand out. And ideally, because the hiring system is broken through job applications and resumes, you never know whether the job you're applying to on LinkedIn or Indeed has been filled, has maybe been filled 6 months ago, or maybe a kind of a honeypot job that doesn't exist, but is used by the company to create a presence, to attract submissions so they can sift through those resumes, put them into their database, see what's out there. Think about the future. Think about the AI future. Right now, employers are struggling with the number of AI-written resumes that are flooding in. How do you know what's real? Does this person know how to put two words together, or do they just ask AI to write the resume for them? Imagine what happens when AI agents get into the game and start scouring the web for job openings that fit your skill set. The AI agent then rewrites your resume to fit that job description and submits it. So I envision in the very near future that we're going to be going from the fabled 250 submissions per position to 2,500 submissions to 25,000 submissions. And now employers are going to have to use AI to verify the truth of the submission, to find out if it was submitted by a person, whether it was submitted by AI, written by AI. It's a cluster blank of the most monumental proportions imaginable. And it all comes back to what I think is important. Build relationships. Stop applying to jobs. Find your job through your network. Build trust with the people around you so that they can share your value with others and connect you to people, to opportunities, to future opportunities, so that you're always in this career building state of engaging with people in your industry, providing value, sharing your thoughts through thought leadership. I believe that if you engage in this practice on a regular basis, you will never have to search for a job again.
Nice.
Because the opportunities will constantly be brought to you. It will be a natural evolution of you being proactive about the value that you deliver, that you want to deliver. Last year, I decided I was going to become an Excel master. I took a course. I'm just imagining this statement that someone's going to make on their profile.
Oh, sure. Okay. Okay.
I'm not saying it for me. I'm saying, for example, right? I had this project that I started last year to become an Excel master. I have now attained that goal. I revolutionized the way that we do our forecasting system in the company. It's been great working with my team, whatever it is. Imagine over time accruing that kind of career narrative where you're constantly talking about how you're serving better, you're accomplishing more, you're making a difference. Sooner or later, you're going to connect with someone who says, I want you to come and help us out, right? So long-winded answer to your question about the resume. I think it just doesn't work anymore, and we're spending far too much attention to it, and it goes in the circular file basically. You
Yeah,
know,
I can tell you when
it's a
I'm looking at
placeholder.
candidates.
It's a leave behind. I always tell people it's a leave behind. They always say, "Well, what do I do about the resume? Do you work on the resume?" It's like, yeah, the resume is important in the sense that it's part of what you need in your package, but it's a placeholder. It goes in the folder, and
Mhm.
that's basically it.
I've seen so many resumes, and I imagine you've seen even many multiples more. And I look at them, I'm like, I don't know how much time you stuck into this or what's going on, where they put jobs that they've been at for a week or two. They have a laundry list of things that they did at this job. Like, did you really? Anyways, the main reason that I use resumes is purely to look at dates. How long did you stay at a given
Mhm.
job? And to look
Sure.
for patterns. If I can see
Yes.
you left your job every
Absolutely.
6 months, probably not the job.
Yeah. So here's something that I tell people about that, about the duration of the job, because you got to remember that we are at a time in business where the duration of a job is less and less.
Oh yeah.
You know, the average job tenure across the board is, I think, somewhere between 4 and 5 years.
Wow.
For younger candidates, Gen Z millennials, younger millennials, it's 2 to 3 years.
All right. I was gonna say like 3 months.
And right, yeah, no, I mean, so there's this concern, this again, kind of a legacy concern around, oh, I don't want to be perceived as a job hopper. But for the candidates, I recommend that they consolidate a number of these short-term positions in their LinkedIn profile under a nested consultancy, where they talk about, maybe it's called um, project management specialist. And you want to create a portfolio. Just because you only spent 6 months at this company is not a ding against you if you were there to accomplish a particular project in 6 months and you succeeded.
Very true.
Um, you could have been there for 6 months and the company got sold and everyone got laid off. It's important to know that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So there is a way of using this portfolio concept to create the understanding that you are on a growth pattern as a professional. Every one of those small, short duration gigs taught you something. And you,
Hopefully.
right? Well, hopefully. And I think that's what we all have to kind of try to be conscious of as we're putting these things together. It's like, well, what did I learn? And am I better for it? That gives you the opportunity to really share this with the world and say, I'm actually a lot more capable and valuable to you as a professional because I was in 5 short duration gigs in succession. I would never have had this level of experience if I had been in one company for that period of time.
Yeah, law
So,
of diminishing
right,
returns. Sure.
there's different ways of slicing and dicing this for the individual who is afraid of being perceived as a job hopper. It's like, what do I do about these short-term gigs? What do I do about this gap here where it took me a year to find a job? And I said, well, did you continue to search for a job, keep up on what was going on in your industry, network around this, go to conferences, learn new skills? If the answer is yes to all of those questions, the gap served a purpose. While you were looking for a job, you were not idle. You continued to work essentially as a professional to keep your skills up, to learn new skills, to communicate with other people in your industry. That's valuable. Represent that. People will understand that. Everyone goes through a dry period, man. We all
Oh yeah.
have long dry periods. Like no one's perfect. No one is this kind of robot ideal worker, right? Again, vulnerability can work in your favor if you say, "Hey, I was very active getting a job, but wasn't anything out there." And I will say I actually turned a few things down because they didn't really measure up for me. It really wasn't what I wanted to do. Now, because of this time that I've had out in the wilderness, I have a clearer sense of what value I provide. And when I land, I am going to be gangbusters, loyal, devoted, because I now know more than ever that this is what I want to do. It's like, why wouldn't you hire that person?
Right. Right. I know we don't have a ton of time left here, John, but I did want to ask you something that I got it just running through my brain here. You come up with someone, or someone reaches out to you, I should say, that can't find their job, they got laid off, or whatever reason they got disconnected from their last position. They come to you, and maybe on paper they seem all right, but when you're chatting with them, they are just dry as a bone. And sooner or later, they're going to have to go through that interview, and sooner or later, that interviewer is going to say, "Whoa, I don't care how cool you are just, it's rough." How do you work with people that are just that limited, personality wise?
There are times where I find someone, and it's rare, where I find someone who is just that dry that I can't help them.
Oh, wow. Okay. Fair.
Right?
Totally fair.
It's rare. A lot of times people will say, I'm terrible at selling myself. I clam up in an interview. I'm terrible. I hate going to networking events. I don't know what to say. I'm an introvert. I really would rather stay home. So many times I've gotten dressed and gotten ready to go, and I don't go out the door. And my response to that is, if you know what it is that you love to do, and you've done it, you have experience, your goal is not to force yourself into a conversation. All you're doing is sharing what you love. And if you can really center in that core enthusiasm from all the work that you've done and identify those experiences, skills, whatever that might be, then you don't have to sell yourself a day in your life. You don't have to clam up in that interview. You don't have to be intimidated or afraid. You can just talk about what fills you up with energy and enthusiasm for the work that you do. And that will, for the most part, get the engine moving and help people rediscover their connection to the work that they do and the meaning of that work and the purpose of that work. There was a graduation commencement address that was delivered a number of years ago at Columbia. A guy named Ben Horowitz, who's a venture capitalist, and he came up with this great little story. And he said, I'm up here talking about the future for you graduates, and there's this old idea that from Joseph Campbell, follow your bliss and the money will follow. He said, I hate that idea. He said, if follow your bliss was a prescription for success, then every contestant on American Idol would be a zillionaire.
There.
He said, so don't follow your bliss, but what I suggest you do is follow your usefulness. Figure out what it is that you do that can move the needle for someone else. How can you use what you've learned? He's talking to graduates in 4 years at Columbia. How can you use all of that knowledge to make someone's business better, someone's life better? And just focus on that. And that's what's going to get you going. And what you may find over time is that the more useful you are, that becomes your bliss. Because you identify strongly with that usefulness, that utility, that was the results of what you do. That's really what human connection is all about, right? How can I make your life better through what you do?
The value that you provide, and then there's value to you in offering value, just like you're helping anyone, whether it's as a job or anything like that.
Exactly.
I get that. I love it. John, where can people find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn. I'm the only, to my knowledge, John Tarnoff on LinkedIn, JohnTarnoff. You can find me on my website, johntarnoff.com. And that's a great start.
Nice.
Please out and communicate with me there and ask a question, or let's have a conversation.
And just to be clear, you're working with people all over the country, right?
Yeah, and the world. Yeah, I work
The
internationally.
world. All right. Yeah. Sweet. I love it. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, John.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah. This has been Authentic Business Adventures, the business program that brings you the struggle stories and triumphant successes of business owners across the land. My name is James Cademan, and Authentic Business Adventures is brought to you by Calls on Call, offering call answering and receptionist services for service businesses across the country on the web at callsoncall.com. And of course, the Bold Business Book, a book for the entrepreneur in all of us, available wherever fine books are sold. If you're listening to this on the web, if you could do us a huge favor, give it the big old thumbs up, subscribe, and of course, share it with your entrepreneurial friends and those friends that you know that may be looking for a new job and they're just having a little bit of a hard time finding that perfect position. We'd love to thank you, our wonderful listeners, as well as our guest, John Tarnoff of Reinvention Group. John, can you tell us that website one more time?
Sure, it's johntarnoff.com.
Well, that doesn't get any easier, does it? I love it. Past episodes can be found morning, noon, and night at the podcast link found at drawincustomers.com. Thank you for joining us. We will see you next week. I want you to stay awesome. And if you do nothing else, enjoy your business.